Who can tell me what you remember about the sun? This is like real early in the year. Yes, ma'am. Sun is the main source of energy for photosynthesis. The sun is the main source of energy for food chains. The sun is the main source of energy for ecosystems, correct? The sun is also the main source of energy for the water cycle. That's the first thing I wrote in our notes today. The sun is the main source of energy for the water cycle. Again, first definition for today is right here. The sun is the main source of energy for the water cycle. All right, we've had time to jot that down, I hope. First definition for today is the sun is the main source of energy for the water cycle. So again, if you see questions referring to the main source of energy, boy, the sun sure is a good choice on most of them. The sun is the catalyst, meaning it is the thing that starts the water cycle. Whether you want to talk about evaporation or transpiration, the sun is the reason why the water cycle starts. Without the energy from the sun causing evaporation and transpiration, we're not going to have condensation after that because there would be no heat to lose. We would have no precipitation without condensation, and we couldn't have that cyclical movement of water from the earth to the atmosphere and back to the earth again because it just could not happen. So let's talk about what happens. There's a puddle outside. The sun looks down, and we have something called evaporation. If you need to say, Penelope, in your head, evaporation. Evaporation is when liquid water turns into water vapor or a gas. Evaporation is when liquid water gains enough heat that those molecules start to move fast enough and far enough apart that they turn from a liquid into a gas in a process called evaporation. I am not going to get angry if you say evaporation out loud. Please remember that it's evaporation, but if that helps you remember it, throw down. Evaporation it is. We'll do this in blue since we're talking about water. Let's see if I can highlight this and highlight this. Again, evaporation. Evaporation is when liquid water gains enough heat, it turns from water to water vapor. Or, if we want to get a little bit more technical with that, it turns into a gas. It's water in the form of a gas. Water vapor is water in the form of a gas. So we have to talk about transpiration, or as I look at my anchor chart, plant sweat in air quotes. If that's the way that we remember it, awesome. Plants have to release water when they get overheated. That's what they do. It helps to keep them cool in the same way that sweating helps keep us cooled off. Right? When you sweat and the air blows against your skin, does it feel better? Absolutely, it feels better. It makes you feel better. That's your body's way of cooling off. Plants are doing the same thing. Again, transpiration is the process where plants lose water out of their leaves. So if I'm taking notes, and I change this to green, transpiration. I'm going to put in quotes plant sweat. Whoops. There, transpiration, quote unquote, plant sweat is when plants lose water through their leaves. And there's evaporation with a little bit too big of a highlight now, but that's fine. All this hot water vapor with all this energy, molecules are moving around, and we know that heat rises. They rise up into the atmosphere. They keep going up into the sky. What happens the further I go up for a long while? It gets colder. So they have all this heat energy, and they start to lose the heat energy to the atmosphere around them. When they start to slow down, they slow down more and more. Eventually, they're going to get so close that they turn from a gas back into a liquid. I've seen that before. Gas, when you take away heat, turns back into a liquid from that weird-looking triangle circle thing that we had. And what do I call that process of taking heat away and water vapor turning back into water? Condensation. And for us, something that you better be ready to hear and say often, condensation is cloud formation. Condensation is cloud formation. So I just had evaporation and transpiration. All that heat and water vapor goes up into the atmosphere, loses its heat energy, and turns back into teeny tiny little droplets of water in a process that makes clouds. It is called condensation. Condensation is cloud formation. Elijah was talking about he sees condensation on the mirror in his bathroom when he takes a hot shower. Same thing. It was a gas. It got cold by the mirror. It turned back into a liquid. Condensation. Condensation is cloud formation. Okay, condensation is cloud formation. If you got on the bus this morning, you probably saw some condensation on the inside of the windows. When we got on the bus for a field trip, it was cold. Everybody was breathing, and our hot air from our mouths and all the talking that we did collected on the windows and condensated and made this foggy looking windows. And my girls wrote the word condensation on the window, and we took a picture of it. Condensation. Normally I would yell at a child for writing on the bus windows because that's not what we're supposed to be doing. But when you walk back there and it's a science word, kind of hard to get mad at them, right? Especially when they can tell me what's going on. I know they were paying attention in class. I let it slide. Condensation. Do what? What? It'll eventually go away, yeah, but I took a picture of it, so it's never going away here. Listen, condensation. Condensation is important because this is when the water vapor turns into small drops of water. We know that condensation, looking at the anchor chart, is water vapor loses heat energy and changes from a gas back into a liquid. So if I go to here, change my color back into a blue. Condensation is cloud formation. And we also know that it is when water vapor loses heat energy and changes from gas to liquid. So if we start from the beginning, the sun shines on the puddle. Everybody good with that? The water in the puddle gains enough heat that it changes from a liquid to a gas in a process called evaporation. That hot water vapor rises in the atmosphere, loses its energy because the atmosphere is cold. It loses its heat energy to the atmosphere and changes back into a liquid in a process called condensation. We know that condensation is cloud formation. Now, that's not the end of the water cycle. If that was the end of the water cycle, evaporation, then clouds form, it would be very cloudy outside and we'd all be dead because all the water would be gone, right? If it just evaporated and condensated and never came back down, we would be dead. The earth would be dry with a bunch of clouds above us. But that's not what happens. Now, when the clouds form, those little teeny tiny drops of water I talked about that were inside of the cloud start bumping together. Eventually, enough of them bump together that the convection, the heat rising, can't keep them up in the air anymore, and they fall to the ground. There's four main forms that it's going to fall to the ground. If water fell out of the sky today, it would probably be rain. If it had fallen out really early this morning, maybe snow, because it was like 32 when I got up. Really close. Right? Maybe sleet, probably snow. It would have melted before it got to the ground anyway. But rain, sleet, snow, and hail are my four types of precipitation. Precipitation is any form of water that makes its way from the atmosphere back to earth. Sleet is going to be when snow falls. There's a layer of warm air that melts it, and then a layer of really cold air that refreezes it again before it hits the ground. Refreezes. It goes from a solid snow to a liquid and then back into ice. It doesn't have time to form flakes. It turns into ice. Sleep. We'll get to lightning when we get to weather. Again, precipitation, for those of us taking notes, which should be everybody. A little disappointed some of us not taking notes, but that's on you, not me. Precipitation, any form of water that makes its way from the atmosphere back down to Earth's surface. Rain, sleet, snow, and hail are the four main types. Other types of precipitation, yes. Are we going to get into them this year? No. Maybe if you do a podcast on some of the really weird things, you can. But again, rain, sleet, snow, and hail is the only thing that's going to be on the test. Rain, sleet, snow, and hail. All right, so just to wrap this up for our class, really quickly, there's a puddle somewhere, right? What happens to the puddle? It doesn't sit there forever. Boys in the middle back there. The sun heats it up and it goes through a process called what, Isabel? It goes through a process called evaporation. Now, evaporation is when water changes to a gas. The sun can also heat up plants and make them, quote unquote, sweat. What do we call it when plants sweat, Kinley? Transpiration. I've heard people call it transportation. That's driving a car, something to do with cars. Transpiration. We'll get there. Now, once the water goes up into the atmosphere and it changes from a gas back into a liquid and it forms clouds, Elijah, we call it condensation. Condensation is cloud formation. Now, Thomas, it can't stay in the clouds forever. How does it make its way back to Earth? Yep. Precipitation, rain, sleet, snow, and hail. We've done the main things of the water cycle. We'll cover the rest of it over the next few days. I guess for the folks at home, smash the like button and subscribe. Click the bell for notifications.